Our panelists today, Commissioner Reuben Collins, President of the Charles County Board of County Commissioners, Commissioner Randy Guy, President of the St. Mary's County Board of Commissioners, and Commissioner Mike Hart with the Calvert County Commissioners. Thank you all for being here today and joining us. On behalf of our leadership, we appreciate your time. Let me first begin by recognizing what a tremendous responsibility has been given the current state of our economy and our country, from the global pandemic and making decisions which are truly life or death, to the civil unrest we are seeing across the country. As the elected leaders for your county, how have you held up during this time? And what has been the toughest decision that you've faced since March? And Reuben, I'm going to start with you.
First off, I'd like to say good morning to everyone and thank you for giving me this opportunity to represent Charles County. This has been, to say the least, a memorable period. More than any other time in my 10 years representing the county, I witnessed a period where so many things were taking place. Amazingly, this entire term began somewhat, quietly. We were very confident in goals that we had established to really build our overall economy, and we were looking at numbers that made us feel very confident that the next 4 years would provide adequate resources for public education, public safety, all of our responsibilities. We thought that, wow, this is going to be an opportunity for us to really move forward on major legislation and really steer our overall economy forward. So just like almost literally like the pandemic itself, our reality shut us down and it brought us to the point where we are right now. And to respond to your question, what was one of the most difficult and important decisions? I would say at the very first stage, when the governor began the process of easing up our overall activities throughout the state, and he began a minimal attempt at opening up on phase 1. Our county opted to wait a couple of weeks and then go into phase 1. That was the result of the type of feedback that we were getting directly from our community. But now you contrast that with obviously the interests of our business sector and many of our citizens that were really, really excited and really very anxiety driven in their interest in wanting to reopen everything. And so a decision was made by a majority of the board to reflect and understand the importance of reopening, but also put in context that and many of our citizens, were not necessarily engaged to the point where they felt it was time to reopen. Now, what I recognize, much of that is based on misinformation. I think most of it was based on a thought that, well, reopening meant that everything was going to look like it did, prior to the actual shutdown. And so it did require some education on our part. Since that time, the county has maintained consistency directly with the governor's order, and we're at present primarily where most of the state is. So, but to answer your question, that was arguably one of the most difficult decisions I ever had to make, because I was really balancing public health, the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens with an obvious need within our community to really provide an opportunity for our economy to reopen. So that would be my response to that.
Thank you very much. Randy, do you want to take the question? What's been the toughest decision since you've all faced since March?
I think some of the toughest decision is just like what Collins mentioned about opening up and the pressure that we were receiving from the community, not just community, but also the that those out there that had small businesses that have been closed and trying to do something to help them out became very, very difficult decisions to be made. And we took several million of our, might say our CARES grant to go towards community and have them apply and hopefully help them out get through this. And that was probably, I wasn't really a decision. I would say it's probably a good decision to make. But the trying time is just like Ruben said, we were doing well in starting in my last term here, and everything looked good. Revenues were doing fine. We were meeting all the goals that we had set forth as far as providing our community with everything they need to go on in life. And then all of a sudden, wham! It threw a big monkey wrench into everything. And when that happened, it just became a snowball effect. And the only thing we do, we had to follow the governor's orders. We had to follow the health department's orders, and it became very trying for our citizens to follow this completely. And we need to get back to business. We need to get people back to work. We need to move on. And the thing of it is to convince the people that we still need. I'm fully convinced, just like the aircraft that crashed into the trade centers in New York, we changed the way we flew, and by all the different kinds of security checks and everything. Same thing's going to happen with this. We may have to continue distancing. We may have to continue wearing masks. And to convince the people to do this is really tough to do. Not everybody's going to do it. And even if we do get some kind of an antivirus or whatever type of remedy solved and a vaccination of some type, it's going to take years to vaccinate 375 million people. So we need to live with this for maybe many years. And it's going to definitely change everything. And we're starting to feel the effect now. We just got notification from Department of Transportation, State of Maryland. They're cutting almost 1/3 of our revenue down that we usually get for roads and transportation. That's over $500,000 for us, and that's a lot of money. And I even see further cuts because the state's going to be hit hard with revenue. We're going to be hit hard with revenue, and a lot of decisions have to be made that could affect the way we do life today. And I'm hoping for the best, but at the same time, on the real estate market, I've heard nothing but good things so far. Of course, with those refinancing and things like that, I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about that. So we'll get to that a little bit later. That's the difficult times. Is just myself. I don't like staying at home. I like to get out. I like to go to these meetings. I like to go. I'm a social type person, so it's been very tough.
Thank you, Randy. Mike, I'll hand it over to you. What has been the toughest decision you have made since March? How have you all been doing?
Well, staying on this theme, talking about the decision to open or not, I would be surprised if the board had backed off its stance, but pretty much we're of a stance of we would have never shut down any of the businesses. When I talked to Doc Polsky face to face at the time, right before Governor Hogan pulled the switch on this, he wanted to be extremely aggressive, close down as much as possible. And I said, okay, if you want me to go with you on this, I have one question for you. You're leaving the grocery stores open, you're leaving the Walmarts open, same questions you guys have heard from the public. If you're leaving those open, what makes them less dangerous than a guy getting a pizza at a pizza place? His response to me at the time was, well, they're in there longer. Well, not necessarily, and I'm pretty sure you guys have seen that when that stay-at-home order went out, I've never seen so many people in the grocery store at one time in my life. So the social distancing piece was blown right out of the water. My biggest fear is that when it comes time for next year's budget and we see the loss in revenue from payroll tax, that we're really going to see it. And then like Commissioner Guy mentioned, the state's handing out all this money and sorry guys, get my brain working here, and unemployment, and not getting that check on the 20th, for sales tax from all these places, we're going to see the cuts on our way. So, I call it the financial tsunami. There's no right answer. I mean, you don't want if one person gets sick, but at the same token, financially you're being devastated. So if there is no vaccine, I mean, you can't live without money. And I heard one guy say one time, if you want to make sure people get sick, don't let them afford to have health insurance anymore. So I would be surprised if our board would back down off of that. But yeah, we haven't liked this at all.
I can understand that. I know Mr. Guy brought up the vaccines, and they said they'll have 15 million by January, but you're right. We have 330 million people in this country, and it grows every day. So
Right, just in 6 million in Maryland alone.
yeah. So we've been advocating for both state and local government relief in our future congressional packages. We've been involved with every package that's passed as a realtor party. As you may know, real estate's remained essential in Maryland, but not across the country. Only 13 states have kept it essential. So we've been working hard to keep it essential here and allow our members to work, because we believe housing is essential for everybody. And this is part of the packages that we've been seeing. Unemployment benefits for individual contractors, which are many of our realtors are independent contractors. But as we advocate in this next package for state and local funding to help make that shortfall, if it's not a lack of revenues, what is your biggest concern for the county at this time as we enter the new fiscal year in about 2 weeks? And
You
anyone's
speaking to me,
welcome to
Teresa?
start it. Anyone, Mike, why don't you start this one off and we'll come back around?
Okay, I'm sorry. So can you repeat your questions one more time?
Yeah, if it's not a lack of revenues locally, what is your biggest concern for the county at this time, given that we're entering a new fiscal year on July 1?
Well, for Calvert in particular, because that's really all I can speak to,
Sure.
our Dominion revenue drops by $9 million.
Okay.
And so, part of that test pilot, well, Marine Museum hasn't seen any money. Amory Gardens hasn't seen any money. We're paying guys to be at the pools, not seeing any money. The golf courses. So here, like the other commissioners had talked about, we were starting off really good. In all our schools, we were doing a school a year for the longest time. Well, now all those schools are needing maintenance at the same time. So we'd had a request for like $118 million for the school system, just in stuff like AC, new school projects, things that I know we can't meet it. Minimum wage went up to $11. Well, all those parks and rec staff that are cutting grass and stuff like that. So like going back to that perfect storm, we're going to need paid EMTs. First bill's like $2 million. And, in Calvert County, you don't raise taxes. You raise taxes, you might as well just clean out your desk. So it's going to be a challenge of how we come up with all this financial shortfall. And this definitely was a disaster.
I'd like to give Calvert some credit. It's the only jurisdiction right now in the entire state that reduced their property tax this year. And we appreciate that, because not only are businesses hurt, but property owners have lost jobs and lost income. And there is going to be the concern of property taxes being paid as well. That's something to keep an eye out for in terms of county revenues. Hopefully people will be okay to pay it, but there are going to be concerns. Randy,
Well, I'll be honest with you.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike. It's fine.
No, I'll be honest with you. That decision was made before this COVID thing.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that would have been made.
Yeah, that was out in February when we first did that.
Yeah, I think if it had been given 2 more months, I don't know that would have been made. Even though, it's only it's $600,000. It won't help the lower end as much as it will somebody on the higher end. But like you're talking about real estate, when you're going to make that purchase of that house, it's not so much the cost of that house as it is, what am I paying in taxes every year?
Yes, that changes the mortgage amount completely.
Yeah, it should help that side a little bit, and maybe that'll help move things along a little. But I think timing was the issue on that.
Randy, I'm going to go to you next. If it's not revenue, and I know you brought up Department of Transportation, and we spoke about that on the phone, what is your biggest concern as we go into the new year?
Well, just like what he just mentioned, what Mike just mentioned about loss of revenue, we actually won't have really a good feeling on this probably until almost November, because the first part came in, the first part of the year, it wasn't too bad, but that was just for the first quarter. So after this, we don't know for sure what our positive revenue is. But unfortunately, St. Mary's County is into a bind here because we only have 2 big sources of revenue, and that's property taxes and income tax. I'm not going to pick on other counties, but Charles has a couple of power plants and a big, might say retail stores type of corridor. Calvert has a power plant and the gas plant there. So it's a big revenue source for them that we don't have. We totally depend on property and income tax. So hopefully we won't raise anything. We didn't raise anything this year, and I'm hoping not next year. I would say that a lot of this is going to depend on what is the state going to do, because they keep throwing back on us all these state agencies and forcing us to, you might say, pay for them, even though they're state agencies, paying 100% all of them now, and it just gets worse. Like I told you earlier about the Department of Transportation cutting $500,000 off of our road construction. Well, we got to have roads. We got to keep providing services to the people, and this costs money. Just the way it is. You go resurface a road, it's a lot of money involved. So we got to keep doing that. So the thing of it is, I'm hoping that we'll see a shift in revenue, but the state's already spent a lot of money put out there to try to help people, and we have put money out to help people and keep them employed, and hopefully we need more opening. Though we need to get more opening. I got to agree with Calvert. We got to get more opening here done, and try to live with this epidemic in the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Ruben?
I'm listening. It's amazing how consistent all of our comments are, because we're really kind of working with the same batch of money at the end of the day. I mean, we can attempt to separate that money and say, well, this is Charles County money, this is Calvert money, this is St. Mary's money, but at the end of the day, we are relying on residents of the state of Maryland. And so we're really seeking relief from the same pot of money, I mean, at the end of the day. I don't know how we could not be absorbed by anything more than concerns about potential revenue going into the 2022 FY. We were fortunate. We were able to balance our budget. We were able to maintain maintenance of effort for education funding. We were able to fully fund public safety. All of our responsibilities we were able to handle. And well, I mean, as a side note, even with being able to provide maintenance of effort, we were still getting requests from our teachers union in particular to increase our overall budget. And my concern to them, because I recognize the importance of public education, but my concern then, and it continues to be, anticipating a reduction in revenue going into these follow-up years. And with something like maintenance of effort, that's tied to how you fund in subsequent years. So if you increase, say for example, public education at a certain level, that also equals a substantial increase in maintenance of effort. So we had to really try to balance these things. I mean, these are major issues for all of us, but revenue, and because our county is super fiscally conservative in its approach to how we balance our budget, and as a result of that, quite frankly, that's why the county, enjoys a AAA bond rating now, because we are fiscally conservative in how we approach spending. But even with that, our fiscal offices have really made us as a board buy into the reality that we shouldn't anticipate, the type of robust revenue numbers that we've seen the last 4 or 5 years. That we should anticipate seeing a significant reduction. I mean, my colleagues mentioned earlier, we anticipate that there will be major reductions in personal income taxes. That's something that we were seeing increases the last couple of years. We're going to see a reduction. It remains to be seen how property taxes will play out, but all of you know that is really the primary driver of revenue for local government. And the governor on the state level has already put out, warnings that essentially the numbers are not necessarily looking good. So it all trickles down. That was my point at the beginning. I mean, we're all looking at the same pot of money, no matter how we look at it. and we're all in this together. This would be a very challenging time for us. But I think one thing about Southern Maryland, I mean, I think all of our governments have been fiscally responsible, generally speaking. And as a result of that, I don't think any of our governments have ever put ourselves over in a limb, where we attempted to make promises that we couldn't keep to our citizens. I can't recall, certainly a recent memory where either of our jurisdictions have done anything like that. But I mean, this is going to be a challenging time. I mean, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but that's reality.
I'm hopeful that we are insulated more in Southern Maryland. We know we have a high level of federal government employees, and they haven't been affected by these, as well as the 2 installations, both in Charles and St. Mary's. So I hope that helps our overall income tax revenues and certainly the overall community in Southern Maryland. I guess we'll see, like you said, November timeframe or so when things start coming back. It is rumored you guys meet as a group every month, or at least prior to the pandemic, that the presidents of the 3 commissioner boards met once a month for a meal and just kind of chatted. So my question really is, what does our regional collaboration between the 3 counties look like, and what common goals are you all working on together?
You wanted me to go back and start that one?
Yeah.
I mean, I actually thought that was a great idea, because if nothing else, it probably gives us an opportunity to really talk directly to each other. I mean, what happens out of those discussions is, again, we recognize the commonality of many of the issues that we face as leaders within the community. I know that within the last year or so, and Randy, you can kind of, chime in on this. I mean, we've spent a considerable amount of time talking about CSM in particular and that legislation, to try to be on the same page with a idea that makes a lot of sense, but the reality is its implementation will be a major challenge. I mean, we agreed to this point to the conceptual idea of what the legislation would like to do, but the real work will be actually agreeing on a MOU that will be in the best interest of all 3 jurisdictions. But in addition to that, we've talked about a wealth of issues. I mean, we talked about and shared matters that were associated with, the legislation in Annapolis. But what more than anything else, it gives us an opportunity to kind of work directly together, because one thing I've learned about being in public office, it's better for us to talk as opposed to, just not talk and then make decisions without recognizing this importance of, basically your regional colleagues. So I will continue to be supportive of that concept of the 3 commissioner presidents meeting.
That's awesome. Randy, anything to add to that?
Actually, Ruben hit it all, and it's been great having these conversations. I started them over 6 years ago, and we have been, like I said, we got some common things. The CSM is a big common goal. It's a great resource for all 3 counties. I thank Charles County for taking on and building that tech center sort of thing in Hughesville, and it became pretty central to all 3 counties. And it's going to be a tremendous asset, especially for those who are choosing a technical career and in the coming years. It's going to be a great campus for all that, and we need something like that. You'd be surprised, most of the state does not have anything like this. We are really fortunate that we all jumped on board and said, hey, let's have this done. And I thank Charles County for putting it in their area. I know it's probably costing them more money it's costing us, but it's going to be great assets for us. And no doubt, and there's just a few things, like, for example, we used to have a tri-county animal shelter, and we had meetings face-to-face, and we decided that it would be best to, rather than to reconstruct the old one we have up there, to on 231 to move out and do our own. So these are just big ticket issues that we have been able to solve by talking to each other, and transportation assets and things like that are important to get. A lot of our citizens are still going all the way up to Washington, D.C. to go to work, and we need to make sure we keep the whatever transit we can for people to go up to town. And it's become big for us. The county, the state built a couple of parking spaces down in our area here, the latest one in Charlotte Hall, and bus service has been tremendous. So it's helped a lot of our people out. But I found it very valuable, and we used to have a good breakfast too. So it's all good. We talk
Good
with each
meal's
other.
always nice.
And Tri-County Council, exactly. Tri-County Council is a big thing for us, and we speak about their job placement services and things like that. All this sort of helps out to keep our citizens employed, as well as give us some direction with use of their monies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Hey, Mike, I'm going to kick this next question to start with you. So given the recent 2020 struggles we have faced as a country, has it changed the vision and priorities for the county you're elected in? So has Calvert changed what you plan to work on? And what are your top 3 priorities would you say Calvert has specifically, and then each county as we go along?
Unfortunately, it has. You know, if I was a guy that was, I would never open a restaurant. I can tell you after watching what happened, you know what I mean? So we've witnessed something that, I mean, sports teams don't play. So, you know, all these things that you thought that were untouchable, you know, baseball, you found out it's not. So what we've gone back and looked at when it comes to our CIP model is we're coming up with a number that basically is much more conservative. We're a lot less likely to gamble than we would have in the past because, as the other commissioner spoke of, we do have a little bit of play with having an LNG facility and the nuke plant. Having that steady income right there allows you to be a little bolder in some of the decisions you make. But like I mentioned before, with paid EMTs and the struggle we're going to have now is, you know, maybe they don't go back to school full time. We don't have internet service to every house in the county. And in the past, we could say, well, just go up to the library. Well, you're not allowed to go to the library. Mm-hmm. So there was emphasis on things like libraries and community centers and stuff. And do you take your money and put into something that, you know, everyone can use when maybe they're not going to be allowed to use them? I mean, you still can't even use the pools right now all the way. They're still not 100%. So going forward, you know, it's going to really be like we're looking at brick and mortar. I don't think a lot of us have the desire. We have, I think, close to 300 people working from home. We're not looking to change that. And not necessarily just because of COVID, but it's less wear and tear on the road, you know, less use of space. So I think the direction, you know, we're looking with a lot smaller point of view than we did in the past as far as, you know, there was a talk of an office building on the table. That's completely off the table now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. It's been a 180 in how we're approaching it now.
I think it will change how we look at these. Having we know commercial real estate's going to be hit. A lot of people are going to have a hard time going back to an office or bringing people into an office after proving they can work this way for several months. And so I think that goes not just in commercial private industry, but as well as our government centers. You're absolutely right, and our government staff.
And it, you know, and then it hurts on taxes. I mean, if those buildings are sitting there, you know, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners, they feel that a lot more than we will because they have a lot more commercial space than we do. So, I mean, you know, we feel it on a little bit that we have, but yeah, this is boy. I mean, you hate talking about it every day, but it forces you to talk about it every day. We will be very, very conservative going forward.
Commissioner Collins, how about yourself? How does Charles look in terms of priorities now?
There really hasn't been a significant shift in priorities. I think really building our economy, that has been maybe lessened somewhat, at least the possibilities. But at the very beginning of this administration, we were very clear that providing high-speed internet through the entire county was an absolute priority. And one of the first things that the board did was to establish a task force to review high-speed internet and to provide a strategy to make it available throughout the county. With that initial task force, one of the biggest goals was to address those contiguous areas within the county where there's no infrastructure for any type of hi-fi internet. That area, these are these literal dark spots in the county where there's no, virtually no internet service. Within those areas, there's approximately 2,300 of our citizens that live, and for the most part, many of these have children. I mean, these parents have children that are in public schools, and they're at a disadvantage. And with the advent of COVID, those disadvantages were highlighted even further. And so on the positive side, and that's the result of a partnership that the county established, we were able to receive a grant through the Maryland Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program to provide just that, that targeted area, those dark spots, those contiguous areas where there is no present infrastructure. And the county will be matching the state grant to provide the infrastructure to bring, you know, a significant number of our citizens into the 21st century. So that's major for us, and we anticipate that will be, you know, a positive and you know, and something that we can say that we've accomplished. In addition, as it relates to transportation, one of our biggest goals was to move forward with Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. Very exciting accomplishment took place a couple of months ago, where the county became eligible from what is called a BUILD grant. And I'll tell you exactly what that acronym is: Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development Grants. This is a federal grant program that assists jurisdictions throughout the nation to provide resources for funding. We're specifically seeking funding to complete the environmental studies associated with Southern Maryland Rapid Transit, and they're called NEPA studies. And providing this funding source is a tremendous positive for our residents. I mean, and so it's outstanding that we're positioned, you know, even, you know, in during this period, you know, where there's so many things that we've been disappointed with, you know, that has been a positive for us. And the third thing is going back to the economy. We have worked to try to provide as many resources as we can to open the door to more mixed use type development in the county. We will continue to work with SMAR on many of these issues. As you know, one of our biggest development projects was a gateway into the county project called Waldorf Station. Now, when discussions talking about a recession it kept building up, you know, the prospects for this, you know, I started becoming more and more concerned, because the last thing I wanted to hear was, okay, we have this major development project that will bring a significant amount of commercial real estate dollars to our county, and we're about to see a potential recession. But the developers have been very consistent and said, just in terms of funding, they are absolutely funded. Greenberg Gibbons is the developer, and as many of you know, they do a lot of work in Anne Arundel County, and so they're fully vested. So that's a good thing to hear. But it still remains a challenge, and at the same time a goal in my mind for Charles County to expand its overall economy. And when I talk about expanding our economy, that's really moving away from being so reliant on individual property taxes. You know, I want to be like my good brother, you know, in Calvert County. I would love for us to be able to say, yes, you know, we're lowering taxes. I mean, because I think that's where all of us want to go. But, you know, but we also have to recognize how we get there is by increasing our commercial tax base. And I made that a priority from the very beginning. We have to build, a robust economy. Then we can pay for public schools. Then we can pay for all of our priorities, and not put so much of a burden on our citizens. So those would be my three things.
Okay, thank you very much. Randy? Pressure time. Oh, you're still muted, Randy. We can't hear you.
How about now? I'm sorry.
There we
Hear
go.
me now?
That's okay.
Okay, good. I'm sorry about that. I hit the wrong button there, I suppose. Anyway, I'm sort of in the same ballpark as Ruben there on our economy. We were really doing well, like I said, and unfortunately, we hit a roadblock. One of the things we have actually precious in St. Mary's County is a large federal force that's works for us, and a high income bracket type of workforce. And they're still paid. Their contracts are going almost around through October right now, and probably continue on. So we're blessed with that. On the other side, though, we have a large workforce that works at Patuxent Air Test Center at Pax River that we can't collect any taxes on Pax River. That's a federal installation. We get nothing from them. Just the people who work there go get our money from. So that's a blessing. And we have a large amount of contractors in the area that are leasing space or have even built large buildings that they're working out of. And my fear right now is the loss of a lot of that revenue from our commercial side because of loss of these spaces, or they'll be asking for a reduction because they're not using it anymore. And it's becoming more and more apparent that a lot of them I've talked to recently says we're doing fine, but then our people go home and work, telecommuting as they call it, and it seems to be doing fine for them. So I'm worried about that loss right there, but we'll see as times go on and if they can fill these spaces with others. But for example, our motels have been hit tremendously hard without any kind of, you might say, we call it TDY, people coming in to work with the government. And so that's been a tremendous loss right there. And other things, the real estate, I mean, as far as FDR Boulevard has been a big project that the county has taken on to do a parallel road down 235 to help with the traffic going to the base, which that may become even a reduced amount now because if they start doing a lot of telecommuting, but that's been a big project of ours. And we're looking at only way we can change our tax base is to reduce the time frame on this. You know, your CPI project, you have to start reducing certain things or changing them, pushing them out. We don't want to do that, but if that becomes, we don't want to raise taxes. I'll go along with Ruben the same way. I'm a fiscal conservative guy. I don't want to raise anybody's taxes. And if we can do things to do it, but at the same time, I don't want to slow down the services to the people either. So it becomes important. We're getting ready to build our animal shelter here down in California area, and it's going to be a hell of a cost to us. But hey, we got to do it. It's people need that all just as well as everything else. And talking about sports fields, we just finished 2 of our turf fields, building 1 more right now. These are almost $1 million a pop to do this, but there's been a strong demand from the community for sports fields and ones that can be played on year round without being worried about the rain and the mud and everything else. And so it's been a heck of a cost applied to that, but we heard from the people and that's what they wanted and we're doing it. But we're also looking at a sports complex, but that might be also another thing on the back burner for years to come because the revenue is going to be reduced. So those are things we're looking at on that there. And other than that, we are very much onto funding what we call the middle mile for broadband. We're especially hit hard in this county because we got so much rural areas that this middle mile has become extremely important to get close to hook up. And our IT department has expanded a lot of the Wi-Fi areas where you can go sit in a parking lot at certain places and receive Wi-Fi from venues that we have set up. All the schools have access. They can sit in the parking lot, or libraries and things like that and have Wi-Fi accessibility. But even now, trying to get a computer in every child's hand, they're talking about possibly as many as 1,500 of these, what do you call them, hotspot type things that you use I haven't done it yet, but I understand it very well. But that many have no computer access at all. They're using that. I'm talking to you right now using HughesNet satellite type of thing, which is not totally reliable, but that's the best we can get down here in my area. Like I said before, they want $8,400 to connect me, and I don't want to spend that kind of money out to put a cable down to my house. But other than that, I'm doing fine with what I have, and I suppose those are the important things as far as capital improvements. I hope we have a good outlook on continuing these, but they could be pushed back. We just don't know until this later on this year. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I do want to point out, I hope the pandemic will help us solve the broadband solution, especially Southern Maryland. We see a large issue with it in terms of housing value. If you don't have broadband, they will go elsewhere. Prince George's is mostly connected. Anne Arundel is mostly connected. Southern Maryland has issues in each of its counties. To that end, SMAR is working on several task force. The Rural Maryland Council I serve on, I know we've been doing a lot of the broadband meetings there. We've asked MACO as well as our state association for this summer to do a study for Southern Maryland broadband solution. Not a study, not a task force, but an actual solution. The Eastern Shore delegation this past session actually had a bill passed to provide funding and work with the local cooperative. So we're hoping we can do something similar as a regional approach versus county by county, because I don't believe it's fair that each of you are putting towards different middle mile options for your members and your citizens. So I'm going to move on quickly to the state legislative session that we just had, where we saw the passage of a statewide source of income bill, which begins on October 1st. It requires all landlords to not discriminate against a variety of sources of income when it comes to a landlord-tenant. Our interest as an association is twofold. First, how will your individual counties manage such an increase of renters and tenants, including the need to expand its staff and increase inspection work on a timetable which doesn't affect a landlord's ability to accept the tenant? During the testimony, and this is where the question came from, other housing authorities who already offer a source of income legislation locally have an average of 4 months to approve units, which is about 4 months of unpaid rent or unpaid mortgages. On May 12th in Charles County, I watched with interest the housing lottery update for the Charles County Board of Commissioners, and the inspection timetable seemed to be several years to get all the properties initially inspected, including using an expanded staff. I know in Calvert County, I read recently that you're using some CARES money to hire housing staff and a housing manager. So I know you're all thinking about it. So the real question is how is each of your counties preparing to help implement this new statewide bill? And whoever would like to kick it off, you're more than welcome to.
I can begin, and
Okay.
probably because what I'm bringing to the table is minimal. I mean, we, as a board, we haven't had an opportunity to really weigh in specifically on the legislation, but an additional layer to that discussion and reading the legislation itself was a task force that the county established recently at my behest to look at the possibility of creating an actual licensing program for residential rental units. What we found, and the county Board of Commissioners received a presentation from our PGM staff, or Planning and Growth Management staff, that showed numbers that were kind of disturbing just in terms of that particular area of the county seeing increases in the number of homes that have been reviewed that are rentals that are substandard. And so part of the presentation also included feedback coming from St. Mary's County and other jurisdictions around the state that have similar type residential registries. The towns of Indian Head and the towns of La Plata in Charles County also have these bodies. Right from the start, one of the biggest challenges, which seems consistent with this new legislation that you're proposing, is having the ability to actually do and review the status of properties throughout the county. That they gave us some estimates, and that will require almost creating an additional department. And with this legislation, like I said, hopefully I will put this on the table because I'd like the commissioners to be prepared to discuss this, but it'll probably be in the context of, the registry that I was referring to, because I see a lot of similarities with, and so I think that this is going to be something that we have to look at. And so my comments would be, I really hope that we can work with SMAR on, how to approach this, so we'll be seeking, to interact with you with the ideas on how we could do this, in a responsible way.
One of the amendments that we had tried to push during floor debate was just some time to implement the program for the local counties, because we anticipated it would be a larger expense for you to increase staff and prepare for that kind of implementation. Randy or Mike, any comments on the new program starting in October?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Hello. I've always been on the record. I know that rentals have their place. We need rentals, but unfortunately, they cost a lot of money to the counties. And you just hit it right on the head with staffing. And I use this example all the time. Your parents buy you a bicycle, you leave it out in the yard. You buy the bicycle, you put it in the shed, you put it in the garage. Home ownership just brings pride, and it brings such a strength to the community. We're already struggling with having inspectors to go out on projects now. So now it's going to be an increased cost to inspectors once that gets rolling. And then also, too, you put another hand in there. If there's a disagreement with the landlord and the tenant, now you're putting law enforcement in there. So I don't like things shoved down my throat, so to speak. Just me personally now, not speaking for the rest of the board on this, but, Maryland has a little bit of a one-size-fits-all type mentality. I would have really liked to seen more from them on home ownership. But, you're going to have to deal with what they give you. But to say that I'm less than excited about it, but, it's new. It's maybe I'll be surprised, but, I just wish the emphasis would have been more on home ownership. With the interest rates being what they are, folks can buy, sometimes cheaper than they can rent out here. But that's, just my, like I say, it's early, just my preliminary feelings.
One of our state bills that we've been pushing for 3 years now, and we're going to push again, is a first-time home ownership savings account for folks. And then we hope that continues, because we all know the best way to wealth for anyone, regardless of your class, race, any discriminatory class, is home ownership. We know wealth is a great builder for that. Randy, I'm going to turn over to you to close out that question.
Okay, yeah. Well, just call it Ruben the same way. This is going to be a cost to us to increase manpower. We already have a housing authority, and they do a fairly good business, but we start putting all these new rules and regulations in place. It not only takes more manpower, it's also going to take an increase in time. And it's bad enough to find a place to rent. And you throw all this onto it, it's just going to be extremely difficult for the person who's trying to rent. And do we need to follow up closely with some of them? Sure we do. And there's some places that should be condemned, not rented. But we have to do the best we can to follow what we have, to pass this on to the counties to inspect. And it takes, you're talking about, it could be months. Just like you mentioned, it's probably 3 or 4 months to get somebody's questions answered and to get a place acceptable to rent again. And so I wish we could do something better. No doubt that home ownership is the best way to go if we could do that, but not everybody can afford it. They don't have the income coming in. They don't have the savings to do it. So, but we can simply push towards, I would say, I mean, there wasn't long after I left home, I bought my first home and I've never rented since. So it's been important to me to have home ownership, and I take pride into it and I take care of the place. That's a big point. Just like with Mike.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, that's all I got for that. Yeah.
Just to close that subject out, one of the things that you mentioned was housing authorities, and each of you have a housing authority to manage this type of program, which also means that each landlord or property owner, and a lot of our SMAR members do property management in each county. So one of the suggestions that we had was to work as a region and have the same inspection list, checklist, versus having 3 different ones. Because right now you'll have 24 jurisdictions, plus all municipalities having different inspection requirements. So just a suggestion to throw out to the 3 boards when you all do start discussing this again at those monthly meetings. It'd be great to see an inspection checklist that is similar across the 3 counties. And it may actually increase rental units coming onto the market if landlords and property owners see that's easier to work within our region. I'm going to go to our closing question as we're getting close to the 11 o'clock hour. Watching this video will be 1,800 real estate professionals and businesses who are on the front line of future residents to the county and future businesses to this counties in Southern Maryland. We know the majority of our county budget revenues, as we all recognize today, are directly related to future property owners and their taxes. What is the message you want our realtors and our members to impart on the future residents, all their clients? Why should they move to Southern Maryland, and why specifically the Charles County or Calvert or St. Mary's? What would you like that message to be to the realtors working in your areas? Mike, I'll let you start that off.
Well, and hey, thank you, Teresa, for the opportunity,
Absolutely.
and my fellow commissioners out there. I think you heard a little bit in the message about how well we work together. It is funny how when you say Southern Maryland, you say the 3 counties.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say Anne Arundel or anything else. And we have, a lot of things we've shared, animal shelters, things like that, and we share the same folks. But I think the good thing that people would feel good about coming here is with the colleges, with how we approach our schools and everything. We, for a small rural county that doesn't get a lot of representation up in Annapolis, as the 3 of us don't, because of population, we've done a really good job helping each other. And I think that's a message that when somebody, if you're just walking somebody and they're moving in the area, say they're going to work in DC, Baltimore, what have you, you're not really locking the door on, well, don't go to this county or don't go to that county, because all 3 counties have shown, as far as emergency services, our ambulances run back and forth, our police run back and forth. It's been a really good working area. I don't think we have a bad school in the 3 counties.
No.
I don't think we have a bad road in the 3 counties. I mean, I think we've really done a good job as a whole, being that we are very small and funding is limited, understanding how we affect each other. So, I mean, of course, being partial, I don't know where else you'd want to live in the state of Maryland besides Southern Maryland. And I mean, that's just being partial. But, it's, you look at the waters, I mean, all 3 counties have put emphasis on taking care of the environment. Our police academy is Tri-County Police Academy. I mean, you really look at it and you take and remove us from the rest of the country. I mean, we just don't have the problems that a lot of country do. We don't have water quality problems. We don't have, I mean, schools falling apart. My God, I went to my daughter's graduation from the police academy. I forgot what school it was in Charles County. I was like, my God, like I'm walking into college. It was gorgeous. So anybody that's coming to live here, they're going to get more than what they paid for. They really are, because it's a beautiful place to live. And I just think it's a mentality that of the folks that they treat it as home, not just a stop in their way of life.
Very nice. Randy, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, for St. Mary's County, we're surrounded by water, almost 550 miles of shoreline, and probably the only county in the state that actually has its own river, St. Mary's River, right within its boundaries, totally. So it's we have a lot to attract here. Not only for we try to do our best to provide all the services we needed for the people, and this includes good schools, good roads and transportation, and of course and it includes recreation, and we have to include all these things and emergency services, and it does come to a big cost, but we're responsible to provide all this. And I want to continue doing that myself as long as I can. And I know our county will continue doing that. This is a fine place to live. I'm a resident of the county to start with. I only spent 26 years in the Air Force away from here, even though it's a Navy town. And we like to thrive on the thing that this is aviation is a big part of our county down here. That's why we're doing a heck of a lot of expansion at the airport, getting ready to expand the runway here soon. We're probably one of the few counties that has a pretty good size airport establishment and got more and more demand to expand it, mainly because of the base here being and more involved. And the University of Maryland's getting ready to build it's already broke ground, a research center for unmanned flights and everything. So this is important for us to tell people that we're sort of high tech down here, and we have some good employment and we have some fine housing. They've built some fine housing down here, and hopefully we'll get more increases in that as we come along here. So providing services, our number one thing is Commissioner, and we're hoping we're doing all that for you.
Thank you, Randy. Mr. Collins, I'll allow you the closing comments.
I think everything's been said. I don't know how you could really build on the comments made by my fellow commissioner presidents. We are in a unique position because of Southern Maryland's proximity to the federal government. Obviously, federal contracting and federal employees are a large, make up a significant number of our residents. But because of that, amenities are needed. And as we continue to move forward as a region, Southern Maryland Rapid Transit will continue to be a major priority. And I'm very excited in seeing it continuing to move forward. My closing comments are essentially on our economies. And we started our conversation really sharing the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to all of us. But what we've said in many public settings, that I've participated in, we've begun the conversation and actually transitioning into talking about what does post-COVID-19 actually look like. Because in so many other periods throughout our history, we've taken on challenges and we've been able to, as a result of those challenges, create an even brighter future. And I think that's what this pandemic will allow for us as a region. It will provide opportunities for us to revisit how our actual economies are run. Certainly St. Mary's County, I hate to admit it, but St. Mary's County is definitely at the forefront in terms of technology because of, Pax River and just the synergy that is associated with Pax River. Well, we want the same thing in Indian Head, and with the Velocity Center and ideas that we're putting together. It may not be as robust as Pax River, but it'll be our little baby model, and we'll be proud of it too. But we got to continue to push towards building our economies and creating these opportunities for, high tech industry and research and development within our communities, because the Southern Maryland region is positioned perfectly for establishing, that type of unique area for technology. And so I think that would be the sales pitch for us, to continue to build on that.
Well, thank you all very much. I love the last few answers we've had. Thank you to everyone who attended today and joined us. I appreciate all three of your time. Thank you so much for representing each of your counties and the Southern Maryland region. We do appreciate it. And everyone stay safe, and we'll take care and see you soon.